Hello and welcome to Zeitgeist, the podcast where we select a handful of trending words and delve into how they affect narratives. My name is Khalid Fadzilla, and I'm joined by Rauf. Rauf, how are you doing?
Doing good, Khalid. How are you doing?
I'm good. Yeah. So we recently, our first three episodes are out and have been published, and we enjoyed that a lot. We had a lot of fun. So I think we'll be kickstarting this episode and the next few episodes with a kind of like a set of pretty interesting words, delving into the semantics of specific words, and this time we'll be kind of using blanket themes to basically have some kind of a relevance in the terms and the words that we use per episode. So, Ralph, I think you can maybe kickstart things by taking us through what the theme is for this episode.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you, Khalid, and to all our subscribers, people who have interacted with us regarding the previous episodes. Thank you very much for your support. And if you're new to the show, please subscribe for more updates. Okay, so as Khalid mentioned, we deal with, I think the correct way to put it is narratives and how technology particularly is changing, how these narratives flow and react with different business aspects of business and society. And in each episode, as Khalid mentioned, we cover a bunch of key terms. We call these semantics, and they fit within a semantic palette that makes up a narrative. A narrative is basically a collection of different words and what we call semantic terms. So in this episode is basically about the evolution of, it's called the evolution of influence. Social media, technology, and how communication is being changed, sort of on a global and meta level. So social media and influencers have changed modern communication. They've been reshaping consumer behavior through corporate interests and metric-driven content. On a previous episode, we talked about how algorithms, recommendation engines, and even data-driven approaches to communication are changing the field of communication itself. So how have technological advancements transformed two-way communication in a post-Web 2.0 world? I think this is important to note. We have basically just come out of a Web 1.0 world, right? And now we're in this Web 2.0 sphere. So Web 1.0 was driven by static web pages that people could read but not really interact with. Maybe they could click on stuff, right? And that's a separate topic, how hyperlinking has changed communication. Right?
Yeah, like the time of ICQ and
ICQ.
all the 90s kids would remember all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, ICQ and these like basic search engines. But now we live in this Web 2.0 sphere, basically, right? And Web 2.0 is the foundation of Web 2.0 is interactivity. Now, the game has sort of changed, right? The content creator can have people interacting with the content and providing feedback on the content in real time mainly through the vehicle of comments, right? So this comment box thing. So the keywords for today are basically social media, influencers, mental health, because mental health is a part of it, addiction, compulsion, compulsive behavior, restriction, meaning content restriction, sponsored posts, as in, what's real, what's not, what's related to corporate interests when it comes to content that influencers produce on social media and all that, individuality, engagement and engagement drivers, chat stream, and parasocial communication. So I think we're going to start let's just start from the top, right? So social media and related to that, social media influencers, right? The idea that, previously we had like in this gated communication space, right, with celebrities and studios and a very rigid fixed process of how content got pushed out there. Now we have regular people, right, so-called influencers who create content and have a lot of engagement from their followers, and these influencers might even be selling products, and I think most of them possibly are selling products or promoting products at some point. social media and influencers and by relation sponsored posts. Khalid, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, for those who's listening who may not know, me and Rolf recently made a public appearance on RTM in a program called Fresh Brew, and we were talking about kind of the pitfalls and dangers of influencer marketing specifically. And we began that segment talking about the kind of the basic definition and kind of the semantics of influencer and influence. I began that segment talking about how historically we've always had some semblance or form of an influencer. Back in the days of the ancient Roman Empire, gladiators used to sponsor products. That was news to me when I was doing research on the topic, and that stuck out to me. We have today football players, celebrities, million subscriber followers, influencers, and things like this, and they sponsor products, and they basically go on top. They're featured on the Colosseum of modern media, and they fight to the death, so to speak, in an arena of polarization. So that's quite interesting, and I think social media enables this new infrastructure for influence and influencers. But of course, like anything else, especially anything that has to do with technology, I think it comes with its caveats and comes with its drawbacks. And I think that's something that we, can definitely explore. I mean, first thing first, I think influencers are one of the many modern players when it comes to this idea of attention harvesting. The author Tim Wu, the author of Attention Merchants and Information Empires, very interesting books that cover the history of media, social media, and attention harvesting, and how it has implications or broader ramifications to society and things like this. So Tim Wu talks about this idea of attention harvesting, and I think influencers are at the crux of this. Their job, so to speak, is to try to accumulate or compound as much interest, garner as much interest as possible. And I mean, if you look at the business landscape to any degree, honestly, or even social landscapes, let's not even talking about business landscapes at this point. Attention is something that's intrinsically part of the core human experience. Again, on this podcast, we like to get into the philosophical sentiment. It even goes deep into the philosophical sentiment of what it means to be human. René Girard, the great scholar, talks about mimetic theory, where which basically sums up how, as human beings, we like to follow each other, and inadvertently, this leads to external conflict and internal conflicts within communities as well, because we all are rushing for the same thing. For example, in economics or economies, you have things. Basically, economics is the study of scarcity and our human relation, our relation with scarcity from a human behavioral standpoint. And when we all think something is scarce and valuable, we rush for it at the same time. So that's basically mimetic theory causing conflict. And so basically, this is the idea of attention harvesting. It's difficult for us to understand that. Yeah.
Kind of related to game theory, what you were mentioning, right, about economics. The Nash equilibrium has something to do with that, right? How like if everybody is rushing for the same goal, right, it's like nobody's gonna get it, right? And related to that, you mentioned also about. I think this is maybe a nice time to bring in these other keywords such as mental health, addiction, compulsion, and the parasocial aspect, inclusive of the chat stream aspect and individuality. So this is there's a lot to unpack here. But basically, just to give a quick introduction, you mentioned the author Tim Wu, and he also basically he's like an activist against this whole idea of and there's a large movement against this whole dopamine driven and dopamine triggered technology era that is being driven by corporations that are basically trying to get you to spend as much time as possible on these platforms, right? And so therefore you get the whole psychological aspect of like the notification color is red so that you pay attention to it, the vividity of colors, right? Vivid colors and stuff like that. So as Tim Wu and these other people like Cal Newport and all have been going on about, the addictive aspect of it, and not only that, like for the content creators themselves, the addictive aspect of watching metrics, and we've talked about metric driven communication, right? With the like checking the number of views, checking how many people engaged, how many people liked and stuff. This is all related to compulsive behavior. So on the user side, we have the compulsive behavior of tuning, sort of logging in and checking, opening the app and checking, blah, blah, blah. And then on the content creator side, we have the same thing as well, but they are serving basically two different purposes. And on top of that, we talked about the Web 2.0 aspect of the sort of two-way communication aspect of, very interestingly, not only content creators sort of like back then, like with the Brad Pitts of the world, right? Influencing their fans and the fans acting like Brad Pitt and so on and so forth, right? Now there's a two-way flow where the content creators are being influenced by their fans, right? And I think we call this a parasocial relationship, right? I mean, maybe you can tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, yes, correct. So a parasocial relationship is a term from kind of general media theory, maybe a little bit in line with psychology as well, that describes this celebrity-driven kind of relationship that we have in this modern era, where we have, an audience or a following that follows a specific person of great influence. So it could be a celebrity or a politician or somebody who is famous and somebody who is popular. And the parasocial relationship describes this relationship where the celebrity, for example, a movie star or whatnot have you, has great influence over the lives and the minds and the hearts of the masses. But traditionally, the masses never really had much access in terms of communication to the celebrity. So, traditionally, what parasocial relationship is basically a one-way communication bridge. But now there's some kind of an evolution happening. It's interesting aspects of things like audience capture, for example, where we have a lot of influencers who now have access to chat streams, digital media platforms like YouTube, TikTok, Facebook. You can become somebody who's famous who has reach to about a million followers and such. But at the same time, they can communicate back to you. And there are some great repercussions that we see with these types of things happening. Influencers being affected by their own audience. There's a term out there coined. It's called audience capture. So, I mean, one great case to kind of analogize or define audience capture is, for example, the case of Nikocado Avocado, which was a very famous celebrity YouTuber on YouTube who started out as a health freak, a vegetarian and somebody who really cared about his food. And then eventually what happened was that his audience convinced him in some way over time to gain weight and become some kind of a grotesque shadow of his former self. So Nikocado Avocado is a famous case study in YouTube culture, media theory, and as it stands today. And I think that's something that's pretty alarming as well when it comes to social media and influence.
Yeah, sort of content creators being changed by the data, right?
Right.
Basically, and being changed by what they think the audience wants. And in the case of Nikocado Avocado, for those who don't know, he actually started off doing I think healthy eating videos.
Yeah, he was like a vegetarian, and hence the name avocado. Right? He was a Nikocado.
Oh, avocado. so that's why the avocado. Okay, I was wondering about that. Right. So, but then he got influenced by. Because I think he randomly did like a mukbang kind of video. I think randomly, and people related to that, or people wanted to see more of that, and after a while he got unhealthy from eating a lot of food for the audience, right?
Yes.
So, and what you mentioned about the chat stream, the concept of the chat stream actually is pretty weird in the sense of like, because already as it is, there's this concept of basically human beings having sort of voice in their head, right? And you can actually kind of talk to yourself in your head, right? But this idea gets magnified through the idea of a chat stream, right? While you're doing your stream, you have a whole bunch of other people talking to you, right? Which I think relates to the mental health, the compulsion, and the addiction aspect, right?
Yeah. The working on this very early drafts now, but I'm working on a book called The Stream, that's essentially about this as a primary theme. The repercussions in terms of mental health and behavior and consumer behavior and even general psychology, the implications of these newer forms of technology, virtual life that we have, that we are living right now, and kind of all revolving around this idea of the live stream, which is an interesting concept that that's kind of crept up on us over the years. You have interesting case studies. For example, Playmate Tessie, who is a this small-time influencer online, and I think she does maybe adult content.
She got in trouble for being mean to somebody, right?
Yeah, she got in trouble with being mean to somebody.
And I
with
think she
cancer.
actually has mental health issues.
She actually has mental health, and I think
possibly.
I spent a long time after hearing about that study, kind of going through all of her videos, because she live streams very constantly, and I realized that for somebody who has mental health issues already, the live stream, because she loves to stay on online and looking at her chat and having a live stream on all the time 24/7, it exacerbated her mental health. And that's something that's pretty alarming to see real time. And so that's what that's about, that book.
Right. So check it out. I mean, like, when are you planning to be ready with that book? Possibly at some point this year? I mean, it sounds like a really interesting book, and I think you should get it. So basically, aside from this podcast, we are also planning to release our own books and stuff like that. And I think at some point you might see those books available either on our website or in the description of one of the episodes. So look out for that. The Stream by Khalid Fadila. And so to wrap up this episode, the evolution of influence, we talked about how social media and influencers are changing communication and basically being changed by communication in this Web 2.0 sphere that we're living in. It does not seem to be, I mean, like, although we cover a lot of the issues because issues are important to talk about, I mean, maybe some good has come out of it, but as you can see, I mean, as you can possibly tell, with the the addictive aspect, the compulsion, and also how people are being changed by this two-way communication. And we talked about in a previous episode, we talked about how this sort of siloed effect of algorithm-driven communication appears to be making the world more polarized. On top of that, we have this parasocial, kind of parasitic relationship between people and content creators changing each other and stuff like that. So, in terms of action points, as we mentioned I think I mentioned in a previous episode about actively seeking out and engaging with the other side to try to stop this polarized, siloed kind of approach, right? In terms of how influence affects influencers and vice versa, I think one basic takeaway or one basic action point, and maybe this should be taught in schools as well, is not to be so influenced by other people, right? Right, like you talked about mimetic theory and how it seems to be kind of like natural for human beings to be influenced by other human beings, right? But I think people should start to understand that the dynamics of communication, especially online with this one-to-many kind of type of communication, is changing the dynamic and heightening and exacerbating influence, two-way influence, right? So a basic takeaway is to not be so influenced by people, especially online. So that wraps up this episode, The Evolution of Influence. Stay tuned for the next episode on Zeitgeist. I'm Ralph. from Palindrome, and Khalid, my co-host Khalid from Palindrome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.